Well, let's just start chatting on this 11th of June. How are you?
Have you pressed the record button?
I have, just to get them whiskers
Good,
on video.
Walter Brennan after A Night on the Town.
Yeah. What's the
with
old Robert?
Pepina. Oh, God. There's an awful picture.
Somebody.
Yeah, let's go to Shooters.
Gabby Hayes is
Gabby,
on.
I remember Gabby Hayes. Yeah.
Okay.
Andy Devine.
Yeah.
Remember Andy Devine with that incredible voice, that huge man with a falsetto.
Oh, Ms. Kelly is in the waiting room, so I have nothing for you this morning. I've got some stuff prepared for tomorrow, our regular Friday kind of odds and sods. Do you have anything to share with us this morning?
I've got some stuff for tomorrow, too. I have nothing for today. So why don't we bring Caitlin on in?
And perhaps you can introduce her as well. I was reading her piece again.
Caitlin Kelly is a Canadian. She's living in New York. She's actually in your line of work. She does media training and public relations. She has a blog. And how I got in touch with her is an interesting story. Brian Murphy read the article Caitlin wrote. There she is. Turn your audio on and you'll be able to join us.
Wait, can't hear you.
We got you. We can hear you.
Got it. Okay.
Hi, Caitlin.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Okay.
We're
Last
good.
thing Caitlin said to me yesterday was, brush my hair.
Exactly. Well, that was not an order. It was, I have to brush my hair. and then we skipped the second part. Thank you.
Brush my hair. That's New York. You got to go fast.
Well,
you got to go fast.
Pulled back, so you can't tell. But yes, I actually used a brush, so that's it.
You're looking fine.
That's a lot
Nice
for you guys. I want you to know it's a big sacrifice.
Oh, are you not a morning person?
No.
Well.
Oh, it's fine. 10 is fine. I don't mind 10. It's good.
Okay.
10's about the limit for me. Caitlin, you wrote an article a couple of weeks ago. That's how I got in touch with you. A friend told me about the article. He'd seen it online.
Yeah.
You are a Canadian, but you've been living in the States for a number of years, specifically New York.
Yep.
And you're going through a bit of a dilemma about whether you stay in the States or you come back home.
And the line that got me before you jump in was, quote, left behind a perfectly good country, unquote.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
let's start with that.
Well, sure. So, all right. And thanks for doing this. And I appreciate the interest. So that was a funny line, but it was actually honestly meant to be quite serious. I mean, I have friends here who, have covered war and been to Syria and Iraq. And I've got a friend who's Iranian who had a pretty tough time. So, it's one of the things I think people forget, Canadians, God bless Canadians, you take for granted, great education for, $5,000 a year, not $50,000. We take for granted the things that we have that we pay a lot of tax for. And so you're not a war-torn refugee. This is my point. I mean, I've done work with refugees when I was in Canada. And if you've ever sort of had that experience, there are people who, they come to the United States, and I don't want to make light of it. I mean, it's a funny piece, but there are some serious things in there. People who've left war-torn countries, people who've come in, rubber rafts. I did a story last year for the New York Times, and there were some little kids there who were lovely little kids, but, I wanted to talk to them about, like, how did you get to the States? And one of them just clammed up, and he was a refugee. So there are people who will look at the United States still, I think, very realistically as a refuge. So I just don't want to it's a funny line, but I do want to make sort of the more serious point. It's very privileged for us, I think, as Canadians, for me personally, as a Canadian, to say, oh yeah, I get to go to the States. It's not, I'm fleeing a war-torn country, or I'm expecting a pogrom because I'm Jewish, or I'm going to be beaten or attacked or raped because I'm coming from a country in turmoil. And for those people, even now, the United States is still a place of real refuge. So I know it's a very serious way to reply to you, but that's really the point I wanted to make, was Canada is still so relatively, for some of us, so peaceful. Okay,
but you are torn, to just get back to the focus of the piece, between, are you still considering coming back home, as it were, or re-examining where you're living now? Where are you now?
It's a really tough question. So there's a lot of pieces to that. So people who choose the States, and again, it's not like I'm coming back tomorrow, and I don't know that I'm coming back. So there's a lot of moving parts, and some of them are just really basic nuts and bolts. They're not philosophical, they're not emotional, they're not political. real estate. I mean, it's just, something as basic as where do I live? How much is it worth? And then I Google houses for sale, Ontario, at the price that I can afford, and there's nothing. And I'm being very direct with you. I mean, I have lovely friends in Ontario. I think a lot about if I was coming back, it would probably be Ontario. And then I look at the price of what it costs to live there, and I'm like, I can actually, this is ironic and sort of frustrating, I can get a more beautiful house an hour north of me in New York than I can get a teardown in Ontario.
My God, that is ironic.
Yeah, and I know that's not merely the answer you're looking for. It's not a philosophical answer, but the truth is, practicalities rule. I need to live somewhere that I like a lot. Don't need to, I want to. And where I live right now, I've been really lucky. I landed in a place that gives me a really nice quality of life. I grew up in Toronto. I didn't love it. I couldn't afford it then. I certainly can't afford it now. I'm not a corporate attorney. I'm a journalist, and I've had a great time and had a good career. We don't make that much money. It's not like I'm coming home with a mill for a teardown in Toronto. I mean, let's not mince words. If you guys are paying attention, which you are, there are practical realities to coming back. And to switch very quickly to politics, Ford isn't fabulous. I mean, I'm paying attention carefully. I'm on Twitter a lot. I have very dear friends in Ontario. I was just on the phone with one of them 2 days ago. She's a former Star reporter. So it's not like I'm unaware of what's been going on in Canada. I'm seeing police killing Indigenous people. So you can't get too self-righteous.
We've got big conversations about systemic racism in the Montreal Police Department, the Toronto Police Department, Vancouver. It's not, not a Minneapolis or a U.S. phenomenon.
But you're torn though, based on what I read, what I felt by reading the piece that I just read a few minutes ago.
No, that's a fair point. So, but then here's the challenge. So yes, emotionally torn in some ways. And it was, there's this great American expression. I love, some of these expressions are very funny. And I don't know how you would ever say it in French. It's called a come to Jesus. And I'd never heard the expression in Canada. And a come to Jesus is really
an epiphany.
Stop the bullshit. It's just like, let's really cut the chase. And I had to come to Jesus with my best friend in Kamloops. And we've been best friends since first year U of T. And we went at it, as they say, hammer and tongs, all my metaphors. And she finally said, well, the only reason you want to come home is your friends. I'm like, well, isn't that a good reason? So, there's a lot of moving parts to this. Canada is, from my way of thinking, socially, obviously, kinder. There's no way past that. So that's the issue that I struggle with. And I don't like the word struggle. I think you either do something or you don't do something. I'm horrified,
You're speaking so much like a Canadian because you use the words foot shuffling and risk averse in your piece, and you sound very Canadian right now.
That.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. Maybe, who knows? There's a thing called code switching, which maybe I'm code switching for you guys because it's a Canadian audience. I don't know. It's really challenging because I chose the States for reasons, and I've stayed for reasons. And I'm still working. If people are retired watching this, that's awesome. I can't wait to be you. But right now, we're still working. My husband and I are both freelance. We're full-time freelance. He's a photo editor at the New York Times for 31 years. He has a Pulitzer. He's had a phenomenal career. And we've got great work here. And that's just a larger issue. So as much as I can emotionally say, which is absolutely true, I'm torn between, let's face it, the political values expressed through affordable health insurance, affordable university, just a different way of thinking about a social safety net. It is so bad here in terms of social inequity. This week is really bad. The last few weeks are really bad. Anybody who's paying attention sees that this country, the United States, is so torn economically. And that's really painful when I have dear friends here and some who are much younger. So I have a friend who's 33, I think, and he's walking around carrying $60,000 in student debt, which he can't pay. And I have a friend who's 30 something who's got $100,000 in student debt. He can't pay. And they're both journalists and they're really talented guys. They're making national reputations. And I don't know how they're ever going to get out from underneath the burden of having simply gone to university. That really hurts me. I feel sometimes a weird guilt, that's not the right word. I got my university education at U of T for pennies, $660 a year. I mean, it's insane. And it has allowed me, which is a real gift, to compete effectively here. And so, you know, much as I do feel torn, I'm not torn enough to say, pack my bags, let's go. You know, I've lived here a long time.
Caitlin, when we were talking on the phone, you were quite candid about the fact that New York's got an incredible buzz and a hell of a lot more opportunities for someone, especially in your business, in New York than there is in, well, Toronto.
Yeah.
There's just more.
Well, yeah, I mean, so this is, the irony is my latest client, which has been really fun, is in Helsinki. And that came through Twitter from a guy in England, so go figure. You know, I don't want to be offensive, but I'm going to be honest. My experiences working with Canadians since I've left, they've been frustrating.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your piece.
Yeah, and it's a different culture, and I've been here a really long time. And I live in New York, right? So I've got the American thing of let's go. I have the New York thing of go, you know, let's do this yesterday. You know, there's an impatience, which I know gets, believe me, especially for Canadians, is read as rude. It's really aggressive. Why are you in such a hurry? Why did you email me 3 times? And I'm not a big fan of rudeness or aggression. So I'm, you know, I have to moderate that between, you know, living here and having Canadian friends. But I'm, you know, I'll be very direct. I mean, when I work with Americans and I'm constantly grateful, the decisions are made like this. I mean, just, you know, and we're not talking $1 million investments, but, you know, they look at me, I have thousands of competitors here, which I'm very aware of. And they choose me and they're like, let's go. I just signed a contract yesterday for a significant piece of work for a major medical organization. She came to me, she found me on Twitter. Canadians with me are not doing that. Maybe they're doing it for other Canadians, but this level of, we see you, we like you, let's do business. And my friend with whom I had this, you know, raging argument, and she's a dear friend, we're still friends. She said, all Americans care about is money. All I care, you know, it's just greed. And I thought, well, I don't know. To me, that's an unfair statement. You know, you guys are very sophisticated. Public policy is going to inform how we behave. My health insurance, you're sitting down because you need to sit down, $1,484 a month. And they just informed us it's going to go to $1,800 a month, every single month, so I don't go medically bankrupt. This is insane. Now, what does that do? It forces you to work really hard. It forces you to go for work, get work, accept work. There's a shared understanding here, which the Canadians don't have that pressure, which is a wonderful thing. But, you know, if I have to meet those bills, I can't sit around waiting for 6 weeks for a, God bless them, slower moving Canadian to be like, well, maybe we'll get back to you. I'm like, I can't. That bill is sitting there. I've chosen this country. I chose to be freelance. You know, people, I think, sometimes laugh at Americans or dismiss them. And, you know, and I've lived here a long time, for being so money obsessed. I don't particularly admire it as a value. When your bills are that big, you do what you have to do, or you move to a country that you don't have those bills.
That's right.
You know, so part of
it's funny. I was talking to a buddy of mine. This is a cross-border thing too. He's worked for Xerox for years. He just retired actually, but in Toronto. A lot of his work it is obviously in the States, and he has a fellow colleague, both with excellent jobs. He lives in San Diego, and he was telling my friend from Toronto to top up, and these guys have been making good money for years and years and years.
Sure.
He says, yeah, to top up my insurance this year is going to cost me $22,000.
Yeah.
And he said, that's the reality of it. What choice have I got? I got
Which is a choice. Just to get back to you, Caitlin, this is a choice that you made too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And you know, and I don't know if I wrote it to you. I've lost track because a lot of people have showed interest in this piece, which I'm honored by. And in fact, it was interesting. I got a long, heartfelt email from a former colleague at the Globe, an American who chose Canada. It was a very, very personal email. It was interesting. We'd never talked at that level in all these years. And I finally kind of took the gloves off and said, you know, I never came back. I was bullied. And I'm just going to say that for the podcast. I was a star at the Globe and Mail. I was doing really well. And I was not treated kindly by colleagues. And I just said, I'm out of here. I don't need it. I don't want it. I went to Montreal. I worked at the Gazette. You know, it was an experience. I'm glad I did it. I speak fluent French. I'm glad I used my French. I'll be blunt. My Canadian experiences at two of the best, arguably best media outlets in the country were not amazing. I worked really hard. I brought good skill. And then I just thought, I'm out of here. I don't want to do this. And that may sound whiny, but I had the option. I was privileged to have an American mom who then could I could get access to a green card thanks to her citizenship. I was the unmarried child of an American citizen. So it was not a difficult thing. It was emotionally really frightening. And I didn't say, there's a lot I didn't say in that piece. And you guys need to know, and your listeners need to know, I was really scared. I was really scared. I left behind a really good job at the Gazette. I left behind my reputation, the family, friend. I mean, I left everything. And yes, I'm a privileged white person, but I left everything that I knew at the age of 30 to move to small town New Hampshire, which was horrible. It was brutal. No
yes,
family,
I've been
no
through
friends.
small town New Hampshire. Yeah.
Live free or die.
God help me, I barely survived. But my point is, and this is really important, and there's so much I didn't say. I remember so vividly when I made that move across the border, and I thought, holy shit, like I'm so scared. This is an enormous country, right? It's 10 times the population. And I felt like a raindrop hitting an ocean. And I just thought, I'll never have a career here. I'll never reestablish myself. I'm going to be a nobody. Like I was really scared. And I'm so stunned and grateful. Some of the biggest people in my industry follow me on Twitter. One of the best writers in this country recently commented on my Facebook page about another essay that he enjoyed. And I thought, good Lord, I'm honored to have found some footing in a very large place.
And you said you thought you sounded whiny, but I don't know about that. If I had a bad experience in a newsroom that had a toxic environment twice, I'd kind of say bugger it too.
Yeah,
Well,
but
I think that takes a bit of courage to actually say
just
bugger it.
part of the story, though, is it not, Caitlin? I mean, do you figure that if you lie down, this will go away sort of thing? It's just kind of a passing fancy, the idea of coming home, coming back?
No, not at all. No,
Okay.
no, Eva, these are fair questions. I'm not trying to evade them. We literally had this conversation yesterday with my husband, who's American, who is more eager to go back to Canada than I am. He loves Canada. We have very, very dear friends there. We would be welcomed back by our friends. Again, practicalities. Most of them live in Ontario. Ontario is really, really expensive. There's just no way past that. I found a house in rural Nova Scotia that we could afford, for pocket change. Well, I did rural. It doesn't work for me. So I'm really balancing as a human being, as a person who I am. Some people love gardening and that's all they want to do and like play with their dogs. I'm not that person. So that's my challenge in one respect. And frankly, I always wanted to retire to France. I speak fluent French. I've lived in France. We have friends there. In some ways, I feel more comfortable there than I do in Canada or in the States. And that's another thing that I didn't say in the essay. Once I stop work in America, I don't have to be this like hard driving, work thing. American work culture is exhausting. So I don't know.
So
I don't know.
A soft place to land could be here or elsewhere, is what you're saying.
Well, truthfully, Eve, I don't know anywhere is soft. Let's really be honest with each other. Ontario under Ford right now is not soft. And again, I'm being really straight with you. So I live in New York, and the minute I go into any store, still, I've had 3 months of lockdown. I am losing it. I am so worn out.
I got you there.
But in Ontario, it's still not illegal to walk around without a mask. So our governor gives a daily press conference, and for all the people who hate Cuomo, we're admiring of him. And
who hates Cuomo?
Well, you'd be surprised. It's America.
Really?
But anyway, yes, absolutely. But I just want to finish my point, which is only as much as one can romantically say, oh, Canada's so great and I want to go home. I look at Ford in Ontario right now, which is where we would probably go, is being messed up by Ford. He's as bad as Trump. I'm in no rush to pack my bags and go back to a political regime that doesn't look to me any more impressive than Trump. I mean, Toronto, Canadian politics is something I keep an eye on, right? I mean,
in Quebec.
Sorry?
We feel the same way in Quebec. We are less than impressed with smiling Frankie. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and also you guys have had, I know the COVID rate in Quebec, it's been terrifying because of the nursing homes. I mean, I do follow the news enough.
More than 5,000 dead here.
It's
it's the worst in
incredibly
Canada.
sad. It's shocking. It's a real scandal. So, there's a constant tension, I think, for anybody who has left Canada. And, and this to be blunt, this is specific to me. I don't have a close family. I have one relative. He's 91. It's his birthday today. It's my dad. I have no emotional ties there other than my friends and other than nostalgia. So when somebody decides to repatriate, you just have to think, okay, what am I doing that for? And more realistically, what do I do the day after I get there? I mean, that's really what it is. What will I do all day and how will I do it and can I afford it? And this will sound ridiculous, but this writer who I won't name, he won't mean anything to you. He's a big deal here. And I was very moved. He wrote on my Facebook page, he said, stay. And that may sound like nothing to you guys, but it means a lot to me to have won the respect of somebody at that level who's like, no, don't go. And I'm like, Jesus, thanks for caring,
Okay, so the decision hasn't been made yet, is what you're
No, because we're still.
I hope this doesn't tear you apart all day long. I mean, you.
No. Of course not.
Get on with things.
Of course I do. Yeah, I go watch Queer Eye on TV, and college filter. Yeah. No, please. I'm not like perma tortured. No, not at all. But this is what we wanted to talk about.
That's right. Yeah.
But I'll tell you one thing. I got a buddy of both of Yvonne and mine. He was from Westchester County.
Yeah, that's where I live.
He's been Montreal for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And Terry Haig, Terry says to me, New Yorkers are not rude. They've just got to be somewhere.
Yeah.
And
no, it's absolutely
perspective.
True.
It really is.
Oh yeah, no, and New Yorkers are fabulous. And the joke is I help more people on the street when I see some random tourist with his, map and like, where do I go? Or they're speaking the wrong language or whatever. And I speak French and Spanish, I'll step up and say, can I help you? Where are you trying to go? No, I mean, this again, such a cliche. And this is, I think, a big difference. I've lived this difference. So grew up in Ontario, grew up in Toronto, went to U of T. The percentage, unless it's changed radically, of people who go to University of Toronto are something like 90% are from Ontario, which is fine, not super diverse, even if Ontario is racially diverse, right? You come to New York, right? And de facto, and you guys know this, everybody's come from all over, like from Minnesota and Minneapolis and from Florida and from Ghana and from Iran. And you're just like, oh my God. So you have this really lovely, cool, interesting mix of people, all of whom at some point, like me, have been terrified strangers. I'm just going, oh my God, New York. It took me probably a decade, literally, to feel, I think I'm a New Yorker, whatever that means. I got here, and you'll really appreciate this as Canadians, and this was really hard for me. So I arrived here in '89 and had worked at the Globe. I worked at the Gazette, which in Canadian terms is like, girl, you're doing well. My resume might have been blank, and it was brutal. It was brutal. I didn't have any New York experience. I had none of the things my competitors had: an alumni network, an American degree, a J degree, an Ivy degree. I mean, you name it. There's a list of stuff that all my competitors had. So to be honest, I had to hustle really hard. I cold called strangers for 6 months. I'm not exaggerating. I cried every day a lot. This is not tortured. That was tortured. And I finally got my job. And you'll appreciate this, Eva, particularly because I speak French. Because I speak French and Spanish, my job involved reading in other languages, which most Americans can't do, even the highly educated. So ironically, being Canadian, I think in some ways helped me get that first job. But it was really hard. And my point in that is only that many New Yorkers have had this, whether they're actors or, unless it's Wall Street or law, unless you come in at that level, we're all kind of like scrambling hard to establish ourselves. And I'm going to tell you something I see a lot with Canadians, and it's been interesting. So the Canadian consulate very kindly sometimes invites me to events, which is really cool. I got to meet, was it Rick Moranis? Yeah. The other guy. Anyway, the two funny guys.
The other guy. Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm not a pop culture person. Anyway. I have a picture on my Facebook page. Anyway, you know who I mean. Mike Myers, the lovely guy.
Oh, yes.
So fun. Mm-hmm. Such a sweetie. And it was this really sort of such a weird event. It was Fleet Week is one of the really cool things we do here. And all the sailors come in from everywhere. It's like really, it's like It's like seeing a Broadway show on the street because they're all in their white and their caps and they're gorgeous. And we got invited to a party. When I go to Canadian consulate events, which I'm grateful to do, they're really cool, and I meet some amazing people, really talented Canadians. I meet sort of two kinds of people. There's people like me who came down and stayed. But I meet a lot of young Canadians. It's not a criticism, it's just a different perspective. And they come and they're like, wow, New York, and they're gone. 3 to 5 years, they've gone back. For whatever reason, it doesn't suit them, which is fine. But I do think the people who've decided to stay, and again, some of your friends, you know, if you have a corporate job here, you know, you can make really good money, get your benefits, get your pension, like you can have a very comfortable life. I think being a journalist in Canada is, well, now it's hopeless. There's no jobs. There's no jobs here either. So there's fewer no jobs here anyway. So I think it's a very complicated mix of, you know, politics, policy, real estate, family ties. You know, we all make decisions based on a lot of things.
So let's circle back then.
Yep.
I presume these discussions will continue in your household, yes?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah. I mean, again, we have to work. We've got at least, I'm so tired. We got like at least 2 or 3 years at least of work that we just get the bills paid, get the mortgage done. Here, and this is a big difference, which you guys know, is really frustrating. The cost of the health insurance is so punishing when you work for yourself. And we're in that wonderful place in life where we'll never get another full-time job. Forget journalism, it's age discrimination. So we won't get a job with benefits. So we're just stuck buying very expensive health insurance. At 65, you hit Medicare, which isn't free. You think it is, but it's not. It's $400 plus a month. So that becomes, then you're sort of in this interesting question of, well, I've paid into this thing my whole life. Do I want to stay and like get my benefits back? I will get my Social Security. I'll get my American Social Security. Selfishly, it'll be worth, 27% more if I cross the border because I'll be in American dollars. That's not a reason to move. And it's really the day-to-day life. My biggest challenge is I'm not a small town person. And if all I can afford in Ontario is small town life, that's an obstacle that I haven't managed to climb over yet. Well, and I'm not going to live in a box in Toronto. I'm just not going to do it.
Let's close on this. You close the piece down right near the bottom. You're quite blunt about your feelings about Donald Trump. Could that make a difference come a few months if he's reelected?
Yeah, short answer, of course. We're extremely worried. I can't even find the words. I mean, I'll just start crying. What he has done to this country is so grotesque in every way. It doesn't resolve the practicalities. So let's say he wins in November and takes office again in January. We still have to work. We still have a mortgage. Ontario real estate is still expensive. Like the practical hurdles don't disappear, even though the emotional frustration. Yeah. I mean, I have no qualms saying how I feel about him. I'm hardly unique. I mean, and my husband's Hispanic. So that's another part of it that I didn't mention in the essay. We've got a few minutes left. I just want to say this, if you don't mind. This is really important. So Toronto is super diverse. So is Montreal. So is Vancouver. We know this. There are big cities that are very racially diverse, right? It's awesome. Canada's more multicultural. Look at the numbers. We know that, right? So I found, again, and I'm really serious, I found a town in Nova Scotia that looked cute. I found a house that was affordable. I was like, damn, let's go. And then because I'm a journalist, I drilled down to the demographics of that town. And it was something like 95% Catholic. Again, these are not negatives. This is just fact. He's Buddhist. It was 95% white. He's Hispanic. He's Latino. 72% had finished high school. Again, these are not negatives. I'm not being judgmental. These are just facts that when you move to a new place, wherever it is, what could be Ohio, could be Oklahoma, could be Halifax, could be wherever, we want to fit in socially. We want to feel comfortable. Yeah, and my Hispanic husband, who has brown skin, has to feel not only comfortable but welcome. Yeah. And that's really important. That's an issue for me. For me, I don't care. I'm a white Canadian. But it's an issue that I think about a lot and we discuss. And it's a very real issue. So it's not just like, oh, 2 white kids coming home, and one grew up in Halifax and one grew up in Toronto. No, it's more complex than that. So that, and again, there's a lot, that I didn't say in the essay, but that is an issue for us. And we're fine here. It's New York.
Maybe you'll write a follow-up piece for us soon, Caitlin.
Don't know about that. I've got another essay due today, and I'm worn out.
Okay.
When you come back to visit, we'll all be polite and welcoming.
Yes.
Well, maybe not. I don't know.
Oh, I think so.
Are both of you guys in Montreal?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have a glass of wine, or we'll go to La Salette.
For sure.
We'll find a restaurant.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Montreal has no and we go to Montreal. I have to tell you, I shouldn't say that. I don't like Montreal. We go back as often as we can, to the degree, which is horribly bourgeois. We actually have a hotel room that we choose. And the reason we do it is it overlooks where I lived at the corner of Peel and Sherbrooke when I was 12. I lived there when I was 12.
God,
and the building's long gone. It's some crappy condo. But we get to literally look out the window and be like, yep, that's where I used to jump on the 33 bus and go off to school. So I have strong Montreal memories.
Well, that's terrific. That's great.
Hey, Caitlin, it was great talking to you.
Caitlin, thank you very much.
This is what you guys were looking for. I don't know, but yeah.
It's
now you're starting to sound Canadian.
Yes, that's right. She's denying it, but I'm sorry. It's dyed in the wool.
I think
it's not going to go away.
Candor is refreshing and it's practical.
Yeah.
Good for you.
And I have to tell you, honestly, it's a bit of a competitive advantage down here, because I think people think, oh, New Yorker equals cutthroat. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Just be nice. And people are like, what? It's very disarming. I think if you're Canadian nice and also Canadian competent, it's a killer combination.
There you go. That's what's bringing home the bacon. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you so much,
great
guys.
Talking to you.
Thanks, guys.
Take
it was
care.
really fun.
Thank
we'll
you.
talk soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was great.
Caitlin Kelly. Just one little thing. I have to spring to the defense of Toronto. Caitlin hasn't been there for a while, but Toronto is the most multicultural city in the world per capita. More than 50% of Metro Toronto.
In a way alluded to that. It was more the cost that was getting to her.
Yeah, but she was talking about just to finish off what I'm saying. More than 50% of the people in Metro Toronto were born outside the country. And more than 150 languages are spoken in Toronto, and Montreal is a close second in terms of population.
But it's not as diverse as Toronto is.
No, but it's close.
I think she was talking more about just how bloody expensive it is to live in Toronto.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. There's a whole lot of thought streams going on there with Ms. Kelly, and it's interesting to hear what's going through her head. But then again, it does. You need to grow a pair when you set up shop in the United States, because you and I both know there's a different thought process there, and the apples don't fall far from the tree. And either you make your way, or somebody will walk on your forehead to get ahead of you. Yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah,
that was good. Did you have a good time?
It was interesting listening to her, and a lot of things going through my little brain. But tomorrow I'm going to be talking about grass and vodka, among other things. I'm sure you prepared some things.
What kind of grass?
Of vodka? The stuff that you walk on, not the stuff that you inhale. Although the SQDC is reporting record profits today.
And also reporting there will be same-day delivery.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're sounding very clear this morning. You're sounding.
Do they have something at the checkout counter at the cannabis place, like bags of Fritos and Cheetos?
They don't. They do edibles, but not snacks that do not contain THC.
You see, I think that's an excellent marketing idea.
You
think I should call them?
Mr. I can see you coming in with a Humpty Dumpty hat on. They don't make Humpty Dumpty chips here anymore, do they?
No. They were a company out of Maine. They used to be out on the 2 and 20.
That's right. And you
closed her down.
Used to smell them when you were stuck in traffic.
Yeah. And General Foods was making Maxwell House coffee. You could smell that.
There you go. But that's a long time ago.
It was. I was younger then.
Yes. Are you sleeping well? No.
Not great. So no, this week wasn't a great week. I'll be honest with you, but that's okay.
Up and down for me too.
Yeah. I can have a nap. You having a tough time?
So it comes in waves, and then.
Yeah, I usually get it in 3 or 4 day cycles. This one's a 4-day one. That's where it really gets.
And I'll wake up and go Topo Dicho, and then I'll go back Senior Wences. And then I go back. I don't know where that's coming from.
Seattle? What?
It's,
What?
What? What?
And Sullivan's on the floor, right? With his version of laughing. Back in the box. God. Now for all you youngsters.
That's right. What's Stanley Tucci in a movie that I saw, and I forget the title. He does a bit in the early minutes of the movie. I'll find it for tomorrow, where he's describing what Senior Wences used to do for a living, right, on the Ed Sullivan Show. And
with the lipsticks on the right for the young people here.
Yeah.
Senior Wences used his hand as a puppet
with lipstick on it, and he would talk with and he'd put little hats and stuff around his hand. This is what he did for a living. So Stanley Tucci, I'll have to find this clip, is describing this to somebody, and he's yelling at the top of his lungs, saying, "Can you believe this man made a living doing this for 75 years?" And it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen on film. I don't know why we get into this.
It's actually amazing that Ed Sullivan, every television in North America was on Ed Sullivan, and this is the kind of acts he had, right? The guy with the dogs. Remember the guy with the 20 plates?
Oh, yeah.
Ray Block.
That's right. And I remember stealing one of the acts where the guys come out, and there are four of them, and they're preparing for what looks to be a great sort of feat of calisthenics or something. And one guy lies on the floor, and they put a Kleenex on his face, and they go, okay. And they're all looking at each other as if they're going to jump or something. They go 1, 2, 3, and he blows the Kleenex up. And I was in tears.
Oh, the guys with bowling pins, right? Yeah. Throwing bowling pins back and forth to each other, or boxes. One guy with boxes. He just, different formations of boxes in his hands. God, and he got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
He got 5 minutes. Oh, dear.
Okay, I don't know why I went there,
God bless America.
Yes, sirree, Bob. Yeah. That was America, and that was New York. That was Ed Sullivan at the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Yeah, and Letterman took over the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, thank you to Ms. Kelly. I will leave the link to her piece up there with along with our video so that you can read up on it. And the piece is only this much in terms of what her brain appears to be kind of trying to take in there too. So there's a lot of energy.
She told me when she wanted to come on the pod that she really wanted to expand upon it and be quite frank with us, and I appreciate that. I think it was great.
I'm glad she could join us. All right, we will chat. Demi.
Demi.
Ciao. Bye.